Why is this broke fool with a low education here? Upon exiting a high-end restaurant with my elementary school-aged son, we bumped into a classmate from my school days who used to dislike me. My son, realizing she worked at a bank, said, "Hey, Dad, that lady was at the bank we went to last time. I remember her clearly. Let's close our $50 million account." What? My name is Michael. I'm currently 33 years old, with a son as my only family member, as my wife has already passed away. My son, who once toddled around, has grown up quickly and is now 12 years old. I may be called a doting parent for saying this, but despite not having a mother and the loneliness that must have ensued, he has grown into a bright and straightforward child. I am incredibly proud of my son. I met my late wife at a small factory where I started working after graduating from middle school. She was working as an office clerk there, also a middle school graduate and the same age as me. We were the only ones of our age there, surrounded by craftsmen who were mostly reticent. It was natural for us to become close friends quickly in such an environment. In January, a few years later, as soon as we both turned 18, we went to submit our marriage registration, officially becoming husband and wife. A year later, our son Alex was born. Despite working from an early age, our salaries weren't substantial due to our limited educational background. We didn't have much savings at that time, but I believe it was the happiest time for us as a family. A week before Alex's second birthday. Since Alex's birthday is coming up soon, I need to really put some effort into decorating the room. I have various preparations to make, so I'm going to do some shopping. Please look after Alex while I'm gone. She left in high spirits. An hour later, my phone rang, and thinking it was my wife, I checked the screen only to see an unknown number. Wondering if it might be a wrong number, I answered anyway, only to be informed that my wife had been killed by a drunk driver. Following that were days filled with visits to the police, funeral arrangements, and taking over the child care that my wife had mostly handled. To be honest, I was too busy to even cry, and I hardly remember anything from that time. A few days after saying goodbye to my wife, Alex started looking for her. "Mommy, Mommy." He was too young to understand that she had passed away. Alex thoroughly searched the house, opening doors and the bathroom door multiple times, but of course, my wife was nowhere to be found. This continued for a while, and though it was a tough and sad time, I made sure to give Alex all the love from both parents. This strengthened our bond immensely. I had chosen not to pursue high school due to certain circumstances and instead had left home to work at a factory with a boarding house. Any place I could sleep was good enough for me. The factory I ended up working for was surprisingly ethical and didn't make me work long hours because I was a minor. Still yearning to learn, I often visited a library which was a 5-minute walk from the boarding house. Meeting Joseph, who worked as a librarian there, was one of my lucky breaks. Now retired, Joseph was a former high school teacher. Seeing me reading old high school textbooks, he initially gave me specific advice on which books were easy to understand and even taught me how to study. I first met Joseph around late April. Impressed by my consistent studying at the dorm and continuous visits to the library, he started teaching me more advanced and diverse subjects. By the time I was 18, he suggested I take the GED. "Michael, considering your learning ability and motivation, it would be a waste not to. You should definitely take the GED." Growing up, I always struggled with money, which was a big complex for me. However, that also sparked my interest in money circulation and economic systems. Joseph was a polymath with various interests, so he didn't just teach me academic subjects but also shared valuable knowledge about the world situation and economics. Last time I suggested the GED, but if you have the desire to study in a specialized field, you should definitely go to college. He said this, giving me another push forward. By that time, I had been dating my wife for a few years and was considering leaving the dorm to start a family. The idea of college suggested by Joseph was nothing but a distant dream at that point, but life was long, and I thought maybe someday, if we had more financial stability. After Alex was born, I increased my overtime hours to provide for my family. After my wife passed away, I was swamped with work, household chores, and childcare, leaving almost no time for studying. I've lost count of how many times I've wished there were more than 24 hours in a day, or that there was another me. One morning, as I was about to drop Alex off at daycare and head to work, my legs wouldn't move as I intended, and before I knew it, I found myself sitting on a bench in front of a library. What am I doing? I need to get to work. Just then, someone called out to me from behind. "Michael, what are you doing here so early in the morning?" Turning around, I saw Joseph standing there with a kind face. Joseph knows everything and always teaches me new things. He gives me precise advice when I have problems, makes me laugh sometimes, and is a mentor in my life. Perhaps it was Joseph's calming presence that loosened the tension I had been holding, as I found myself shedding tears while recounting my life up until now. Joseph was calm. He listened carefully to each part of my story, nodding along. I talked about living with parents who were both addicted to alcohol and never ceased to be violent. How I was always injured in some way and constantly hungry. My indifferent parents never did laundry. We were cut off from gas, so we couldn't bathe, and I was always dirty, which made me the target of ridicule from my classmates. Even the teachers laughed at me and never treated me as a student. By the time I entered middle school, I was forced to work part-time jobs by lying about my age, and the money I worked hard to earn was all taken by my parents. On the night of my graduation, after my parents had passed out drunk, I fled with the bags I had secretly prepared and hidden. I had been living this life for over 10 years, but I was sick of it, so I ran away from home, met someone important, got married, had a lovely child, and finally I thought I had a normal life and happiness. Why don't I have the things others take for granted? Why is it always me? Listening silently to my lament, Joseph hugged me tightly. "Don't say that. You've done well so far. You're a father who can stand tall in front of your son. I respect you as a person, Michael." Hearing those words made me cry even harder. After a while, when I had calmed down, Joseph apologized to me. "As a former teacher, that story is hard to hear. I'm sorry on behalf of those teachers who couldn't guide your future. I really am sorry. And there's something I've been hesitant to say, thinking it might be overstepping, but would you listen?" Having cried out my past sorrows, I responded with determination to Joseph's suggestion, recognizing him as a reliable adult. "I'll do it." "That's good to hear." Seeing my reaction, Joseph smiled with relief. Today, Alex and I had come to our favorite restaurant. Feeling full and happy, I suddenly remembered the past. So much has happened, but it's already been 10 years. Alex has grown so much. Lost in these deep thoughts, Alex, who had come out of the restaurant with me, looked up at me with his innocent childlike face. "What's wrong, Dad?" "Well, I was just thinking how much you've grown. You even had the horseradish with your roast beef today. It took me until I was an adult to start eating it. When I was a kid, I couldn't easily have beef, so I didn't have a chance. I was 15 when I got my first paycheck and bought a pack of supermarket roast beef. I got carried away and put too much radish on it, and it shocked me right to the back of my head. I couldn't eat horseradish for a while after that, but I overcame it eventually." As I shared my memory with a teasing tone, my son, eager to seem grown up, said, I see, but I'm an adult now too. I won't say no to horseradish anymore. It makes beef so much tastier. Today's roast was the best." His cheeky words made me burst out laughing. There are many precocious kids these days, but I try to make sure Alex has a childhood as much as possible. However, With the increasing situations where he's becoming more discerning, I can't help but give her a smile and say, "So it was significantly tastier, huh? That's great. But remember, moderation with spicy stuff while you're still in your teens." As we began walking home, a shrill voice called out from behind. What, is there a dirty fool here? We came to enjoy some delicious food, and this just ruins the mood." Surprised, I turned to see a woman looking at us with a frown. Her face and voice seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. As I furrowed my brows, the woman pointed at me and loudly explained to her colleagues. That man was a dropout from my middle school, too poor to even go to high school, and not the brightest either. He never bathed, so he reeked, and his clothes were always ragged and dirty, repelling everyone. What's he doing in front of such a fancy restaurant? Did he go into debt to eat here? As I listened to her, I began to remember. Her name was Emily, a classmate from elementary to middle school. The first half of my school days was miserable due to my broken family environment, but what made it even worse was the relentless exclusion by classmates for being different. Emily, in particular, was the leader among the girls, a prodigy with elite parents working at a city bank, excellent looks and grades, but also the one who disliked me the most. I never wanted to remember her, but here I am, forced to recall those memories, which is upsetting. While elementary students mostly just listen to their parents, middle schoolers start to form their own opinions, which can be troublesome. Whenever something went missing, she would say, "My eraser is gone. There's a thief among the poor," or if the floor was dirty, "Hey, it's dirty here. Some filthy person is making the class dirty," directly blaming me, with classmates joining in the teasing, using the power of the group to ostracize me. Of course, I've decided never to engage in criminal activities. Except for the part-time jobs I was forced to do by lying about my age during middle school, I've lived my life straight without distraction. The flood of unpleasant memories threatened to drag me back into my gloomy school days, but the warmth of the hand I was holding brought me back to reality. That's right, I have Alex. I'm not alone anymore. I need to pull myself together. "Hey Dad, that old lady has been looking over here and talking. Is she calling you a dropout?" The woman, not missing Alex's words, shifted her target to my son. "What? Did you just call me old lady? I'm still a miss, you know. And to think, genetics are so cruel and terrifying. If the parent is a dropout fool, the child turns out to be a fool too. I can tell. You look utterly empty-headed, and such a plain face too. Poor thing, looking just like your dad. You've really lost the parent lottery, haven't you?" She exchanged looks and laughed mockingly with the women around her. I don't care what they say about me. I find it bothersome to engage with them, so let them mock me all they want. But when they insulted my precious child, not just me, I couldn't ignore it any longer. "I'm sorry, Alex, for making you worry, and it's rude to call someone you don't know an old lady. That woman has always been a bit strange. Listening to her, it's like she's stuck in middle school. Haven't I always told you what's inside matters most? She's just disappointing on the inside." After stating this clearly to my son, the woman immediately became furious and started yelling in a hysterical voice. "What did you say? That's outrageous. Poor, ugly, filthy, dropout fool daring to act all high and mighty." Hearing her voice, Alex was taken aback and made a well face before he seemed to realize something, looking up at me with a serious suggestion. "Oh, wait, hey, Dad, that old. Oh, I misspoke. That woman was at the bank we went to the other day. I remember her because of the mole on her cheek, the color of her nails, and her voice, and this strong perfume smell. It's scary to think there's a crazy person at the bank. What if they misuse our money, Dad? We just deposited it, but let's move our $50 million to another bank." "What, $50 million? After Emily's loud exclamation, a man hurried over to them. "Sorry, everyone. The branch manager held me up. I'm late. Nathan can talk forever, you know. Let's go inside." It's time for our reservation. Facing each other, Emily's group and my son and I. The man, noticing the awkward atmosphere, quickly glanced between both parties and then smiled happily at Alex. "Ah, I know you, you're Alex. I watch how Alex increases his money every time. I'm grateful to you. It's easy for kids to understand. So my son watches it with me. Since he started watching your videos, he's been seriously saving money instead of wasting it. Last month, he saved over $500 and bought me and my wife bouquets. I was so touched, I cried secretly. Thanks to you, Alex." Grateful words from the man made Alex smile too. "Really? You watch my videos? Thanks. I'm uploading a new one about stocks at 7:30 tonight, so be sure to watch it." Alex confidently promoted his upcoming video, and I watched their interaction with a smile. I never thought we'd meet a viewer on the street. Glad to hear such a lovely story, but then Emily interrupted. "What's this about? Money increasing in stocks, what's all this?" The man began to explain with a surprised look. "Wait, you don't know, he's really popular right now. Alex here is a prodigious child who, even before starting elementary school, had nearly finished reading all the renowned economics books. I thought if a child could understand it, then so could I. So I bought and tried reading some of the economics books Alex recommended, but they were completely beyond me, which just made me reconfirmed Alex's brilliance. And now, he's making videos of where his dad enacts various economic activities using his own allowance." Emily nodded awkwardly to the man's explanation. "Ah, I see. Video uploading. Sorry, I'm not very familiar with that stuff." In one of the videos, Alex plays the role of a teacher, and his dad acts as a student who knows nothing. But the twist is, his dad is actually a current economics faculty lecturer, which has also become a talking point. As the man added this detail, Emily was taken aback once again. "What? A current economics professor?" Trying to hold back my laughter at her reaction, I stood tall. "Him? No way, that's ridiculous. It must be a lie. You're just making this up for video views, aren't you? I know for a fact that he's just a dropout fool." As Emily pointed and ranted at me, the man gently lowered her finger and then turned to me for confirmation. "A dropout? No, I heard he graduated from the university where he's now lecturing. I forgot which university it was. Your accusation must be some mistake, right?" Filled with years of pent-up emotion, I stood tall with pride. "That's right. Well known indeed. I graduated from H University's economics department and went on to their graduate school." Alex, standing next to me, looked proud as well. "Hey, I plan to go to the same place someday. It's my dream to study at the same university as my dad." His bold declaration, unasked for, was incredibly endearing. "That's ridiculous. It's all lies, all of it. I won't believe it. How embarrassing, lying like that at your age. So arrogant despite being poor." Emily trembled with rage, her face turning pale, while the man sighed. "What are you talking about? You might not know, but Alex's channel is booming, with impressive numbers. He was in the top 10 of this year's channel subscriber rankings, wasn't he? He has sponsors, published books, and his account balances. Wait." The man paused, then glared at Emily. "Hey, by any chance, have you been bothering these two all this time?" Not just Emily, but the other women also averted their gazes uncomfortably. "I'm terribly sorry for our behavior. This man must be the type who's competent at his job." He immediately faced us with an open posture and apologized to us. Although I thought it was a bit immature, I felt relieved to show Emily I was different from my past self, so I responded firmly. "There's no need to apologize anymore. Please don't. Look, people around us are watching. We have another appointment to attend to, so we'll be taking our leave now." Saying that, I quickly walked away with Alex. Of course, the man followed us, insisting on arranging a future appointment and wouldn't back down until he did. He's really dedicated to his job, even outside of working hours. A few days later, at 1 p.m., Nathan, the branch manager of the bank, and Kevin, the man from that day, came to our home with gifts in hand. Our home, though, is not really ours since we're living in the house of a man named Thomas. When we first started living at Thomas's house, I was worried whether Alex would get attached to him or open his heart, but those worries were unfounded. They quickly developed a bond like that of a grandfather and grandson, and since it was comfortable for the three of us men to live together without any reservations, I offered to stay as a lodger, and Thomas happily agreed. Sure, go ahead, there are plenty of rooms, I'm single and elderly, so you never know when I might fall or collapse at home. It's reassuring to have someone around, so I'm all for it. So, Nathan, who came to our home with Kevin, turned out to be Emily's father. With a slightly balding head, he deeply apologized. "Michael, I sincerely apologize as the person responsible for the extremely rude behavior of our employee the other day, and for the inexcusable act of speaking about your background in public." Kevin next to him did the same. As I stood there stunned, Nathan, thinking his apology was insufficient, began to apologize even more deeply, and Kevin followed suit. I hurriedly passed them to the living room and made them sit on the sofa. "Hey, what are you two doing? Please stop with the deep apologies." Then Nathan started speaking. Naturally, it was about the deposit. "So, about your deposit." "Ah, that's what this is about. As long as there's no major scandal involving the bank itself, I have no intention of doing anything, so please don't worry." Relieved by my words, both of them visibly relaxed. As for Emily, she's currently suspended from work and will be assigned to an internal department unrelated to customer information in the future. That's probably the right decision for the bank's future. After the matter was settled, we had a pleasant chat for a while, but then Nathan, perhaps as a way to take responsibility for this incident, or because I was Emily's classmate, started talking about being Emily's father. Emily was our long-awaited first daughter and the youngest child. It may not be appropriate to say this here, but she was so dear to us. We spoiled her much more than our three sons. We gave her everything she wanted, appeased her when she was upset, and more. Though she was academically excellent, and I believe not bad-looking, her job hunting didn't go well. The recruiters must have seen through her personality. Every time she received a rejection notice, she would drink and become violent. It was painful to watch, so, unable to bear it, I arranged for her to join the bank, but that was not good for her. Job hunting was a good opportunity. It was a chance to think about why she was rejected. Yet, I lent a hand too early, just like always. With that, Nathan bit his lip. I should have helped my child to stand on her own, to think for herself, like Professor Thompson did for you. Hearing Nathan continue, I asked in surprise. Did you just mention Professor Thompson? Why would Nathan bring up Joseph here? Nathan smiled and shared an unexpected connection I didn't know about. Yes, a few years ago, I happened to meet Professor Thompson at the station, and he told me about you. Professor Thompson was my teacher during my student days. Joseph had supported me when I was devastated by the loss of my wife. That day, Joseph made a suggestion to me. "Joseph, I don't want to go to work. There are plenty of others to replace me, and I want to quit. But if I do, my child and I won't be able to survive. We have no savings." To my worries, Joseph suggested a job. "I know a retired university professor named Thomas. How about looking after him? His house is big, and you might be able to live there. He doesn't have any relatives nearby, and though I suggested he consider a nursing home, he refused. When I visited him last time, he sighed and mentioned how he wished he had someone to help around the house." Joseph added more information. "He loves teaching since he was a professor, so he might help with studies when he's free. He's a bit hard of hearing, so he won't mind if Alex plays around, and it's a quiet environment. which could be good for a child's education. Feeling how much he cared, I ended up crying again. This Sunday of the week I talked with Joseph. Since Joseph was free that day, Alex and I, along with Joseph, went to visit Thomas's house. Thomas was around 80 years old, but didn't seem his age and was very energetic. He had lived a life dedicated to research and had never married. I was worried he might be difficult to get along with, but he was not shy and immediately took a liking to Alex, calling him a quick-thinking genius. Everything went smoothly, and Alex and I ended up living with Thomas. The next day, I contacted the factory and officially quit my job. The factory manager, Matthew, gave me a kind send-off, making me tear up a bit. I see. I was hoping that this rest period would give you some time to reflect positively, but you're still young, and there must be many things you want to do. Keep up the good work. I'm rooting for you. If you ever run into trouble or have something on your mind, don't hesitate to get in touch. Yes. Thank you so much for everything up to now. In a nurturing environment, I devoted myself to household chores, studying, and parenting. After passing the GED, I secretly applied to and was accepted into H University, which I had long admired. I attended school on a scholarship, joined a research lab, assisted the professor, and successfully completed my thesis. With Thomas's support, I never once stumbled during my university years. By the time I submitted my thesis, Thomas had taken an interest in Alex's genius and had started making videos for fun. When I told him I was advancing to graduate school and had been offered a part-time lecturer position, Alex's eyes sparkled with excitement. Wow, you're going to be a lecturer. I'd love to attend one of your classes. It had been a while since I'd taught, so I practiced with Alex as my student, but he gave me a harsh evaluation. Dad, if you're going to teach like that, it's not going to work. Let me explain it more clearly. Just watch. When Alex offered to show me how it's done, I became the student in his class. We recorded the session, not for broadcasting but as a keepsake. However, we didn't expect the first lesson to be so good, and when Thomas said it would be a waste not to share this, we decided to post it online, where it quickly surpassed 1 million views. Amused by the smooth flow and popularity of the video, Thomas decided to turn it into a series. Subsequently, Alex's videos were featured on variety shows and evening news programs. This led to the publication of a book that explains economics in a way children can understand, and Alex became a sought-after talent, dubbed a child investor. It's hard to believe that we once lived a modest life while I worked at the factory. I truly feel that we've been blessed and supported by so many people. When I shared our story with Nathan and the others, Nathan began to speak quietly. Actually, I knew about the environment you were living in when you were in the neighborhood. I knew the situation you were placed in. I tensed up at his words. It's shameful as an adult, and there's nothing that can be done about it, but outsiders can't interfere in family matters. I had thought if you ever sought help and no one else was there, I would step in, but you had already left. Your will to survive was stronger than my desire to help. Still, it's rare for a child thrown into society to come out unscathed. I regret that I didn't act sooner instead of waiting. I was speechless at his unexpected words. Back then, without telling my daughter the details, I asked her to be mindful of you, but she must not have liked that. Maybe she wondered why her parents cared about someone else instead of her. I think it was around her high school years when I heard from others about what she had done to you and immediately scolded her. She apologized meekly at the time, but the fact that she hasn't changed over the years might be a problem with her character. I didn't know what to say to Nathan, who looked dejected. The room was enveloped in a gloomy atmosphere. Feeling awkward, I decided to change the subject by asking something I was curious about. By the way, how are my parents doing? Your parents moved away shortly after you left that house. The house was demolished, and now the site is vacant, he informed me. They probably feared that I, having fled, might expose them. For whatever reason, they haven't contacted Alex or me, even though we're now visible in public. I don't have a good opinion of my parents and have no intention of seeking them out. I'll think about it if the time comes. Though they didn't raise me properly, I'm grateful they brought me into this world, so I won't reject them outright. Nathan glanced at his watch and said, "Well, it's about time we left. I'm truly sorry for this occasion," and they left. After seeing them off, I went for a walk outside, reflecting on my past and present relationships and my own life. I was a dirty, impoverished child with neither money nor wisdom. Honestly, what Emily said wasn't wrong. I was unloved by my parents, disliked by classmates, and shunned by adults, living a life of solitude. Even though I was crawling at the bottom of society, I learned that there were people willing to reach out to me. Looking back, perhaps I was too consumed by the hatred for my parents, classmates, teachers, and the adults around me that I didn't even consider seeking help. I might have been too cornered then, but if I had been unable to trust anyone and just hardened up, I might have ended up missing, just like my parents. Though my time with my late wife was short, her kindness and sincerity touched me, and having a son like Alex, who trusts me completely, allowed me to regain my humanity. Come to think of it, I've spent more time with Alex than with my wife. Meeting wonderful people like Joseph and Thomas, who gave love without expecting anything in return, was a priceless lucky card in my life. What I thought was a life of despair turned out to be filled with irreplaceable treasures. Looking up at the sky, I saw a rainbow, perhaps because it had just stopped raining. I remembered my wife, whose memory was slightly fading over time, and expressed my gratitude. Thank you. Now, it's time to head back home. As I approached the house, I could hear Alex and Thomas's laughter from inside, enjoying a game together. Listening to their laughter, I slowly closed the door behind me. James, the CEO wants to talk to you, and Michael is with him too. It seems you're finally being let go. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. As I headed to the CEO's office, through the elevator in the hallway, I was engulfed in gloom. When I entered the CEO's office, just as my subordinate had said, Mr. Smith and department head Michael were there. "You don't fit in our company, you're fired." Hearing this sudden dismissal from Mr. Smith, Michael, sitting beside me, raised the corners of his mouth, bursting into a smile of joy. But then, are you perhaps misunderstanding something? The true nature of this dismissal that he revealed next was shockingly unexpected. I am James. This year, I turned 37, just an ordinary company employee. I now live in a corner of New York, originally from a rural area in Idaho. Maybe it's because I was nurtured in a generous and leisurely countryside environment. Though it's a bit odd to say about myself, I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city folks, always siding with those in trouble or in a weaker position, a man of deep compassion. I went to school in rural Idaho until high school and then attended a mid-tier private university in New York. During my college years, I worked various part-time jobs and eventually got a job at an IT company, T-Tech, which at the time was barely more than a startup. Before I knew it, 15 years had passed as I struggled and worked at this company, and I've reached this age. The company, which was small when I joined, has grown into a mid-sized IT trading company. As a mid-level manager and the head of the system development section at our New York headquarters, my work environment is far from ideal, to say the least. Being a head in name only, I'm constantly caught between the demands of my superiors and the needs of my subordinates, a classic example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Especially among my subordinates, many are from prestigious universities, making them generally difficult to handle. Among them, some subordinates have very high self-esteem and self-confidence, and they are very assertive. Therefore, as a mediocre supervisor with a significantly lower educational background than theirs, I often sense their defiance and mockery towards my instructions, even if they don't express it openly. In other words, they look down on me as their head. Moreover, my direct superior, the head of the system development section, Michael, is a typical opportunist who climbed the career ladder just by being savvy. Michael tends to delegate tall, important, or complex tasks to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while he takes all the credit for himself, a deceitful superior who only wants to reap the benefits without putting in the work. These troublesome subordinates and superiors are mostly from the prestigious private university, K University, forming an unbearable internal university clique. Michael often says to me, "James, your alma mater, N University, is like the typical fallback university for us K University graduates, isn't it? It's sad. You must be harboring such a complex, it's scary." Michael would say this out loud, ensuring I hear it, and then the subordinates from K University would laugh mockingly at me, even though it wasn't funny at all. Indeed, N University, my alma mater, is not highly ranked and is considered a safety school for students aiming for prestigious universities like K University. I, too, had applied to prestigious universities but ended up at N University as my safety option, so Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those in vulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she seemed to be struggling with her cleaning tasks, and started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat pulled down over her eyes and a big mask, making it hard to see her face, but she seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, the stories from Elizabeth, who has lived through many years and is a senior in life, were interesting and full of wisdom. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, the casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation for me. However, my subordinates in the system development section, especially those in the K University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me, with my lower education, happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would say loudly enough for us to hear, "Low-educated old man and an old lady, perfect match at the bottom." On one such day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station to my company. As I passed through the ticket gate and was descending the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued to hurry towards the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I need to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could, but unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. No choice, it's going the opposite way, but I'll have to get on that train. Desperate, I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I have to get this wallet to her before she gets off. While receiving some annoyed looks and tuts from other passengers, I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. As I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it, the elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person, to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home." The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing. Just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction? Despite not having mentioned anything about myself, the elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week, I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. And this morning, Mr. Smith personally called me in to commend me for it, all thanks to you." Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through, but it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Was being praised by Mr. Smith personally really such a game changer? Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James, the reason I came to thank you is that he told me to. He said, this successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly." Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, "Why would he?" That day was just the beginning, and from the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together. And to my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, this was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as the contact person for our company, despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, "It was because Mr. Smith recommended you. He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements and, true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual." I was taken aback to hear once again that he had played a role in this. And so, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project from a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project. Creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, preparing for presentations, I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy yet fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work, trying to contain my excitement, and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document files stored on my PC, along with other files for the business negotiation presentation. But they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even more, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud. In a panic, I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over, laughing uproariously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there were Michael and his entourage, looking down on me with scorn. Too bad. All those documents you worked so hard on and the files on your PC, this guy threw them all away. Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, intimately burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but like Michael, he was from K University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. I thought your files and documents were garbage just like you, so I deleted all the files along with the backups, and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin. As David made his flippant remark, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Haha, now James can't do his presentation. Bye-bye, business deal. Oh dear, such a big project gone to waste. What a pity, poor thing. Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughingstock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, who had deleted the files, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To which David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent senior, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Haha, getting told off by the newbie. James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognized a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again. Michael, seizing the moment, vented his true feelings. Hearing Michael's appalling words, I realized everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. I felt his actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy towards me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless as Michael, with a parting shot of "Let this be a lesson. Never overstep again, you worthless supervisor," walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted, and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch, but there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blamed myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk, feeling a sense of futility in hindsight. The next day, I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit hit rock bottom, and I was overwhelmed with depression, barely able to stand. Unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands. Embarrassingly, I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then, someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now." As I said this, Elizabeth smiled kindly with just her eyes showing, then presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. "What, Elizabeth, where did you find these?" Surprised, I asked, and Elizabeth replied, "The day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you've been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them all right there." At that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. "Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my savior, Elizabeth. Thank you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice, and Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. "What goes around comes around. You're my savior, after all." Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client, and thanks to the documents, I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company, T-Tech. Elizabeth, thank you. The negotiations were a huge success thanks to you. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents, before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, "James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go." Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived, and now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably, Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. James, you've come. Take a seat." Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You're not suited for our company. You're fired." I thought to myself in shock, "This is so sudden," and screamed internally. Hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement, Michael, sitting next to me, grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration, and I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I haven't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason?" Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, "Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you." "What?" I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. "James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us. I was talking about firing Michael. You, Michael." At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. "What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor, James?" Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. It's quite the opposite. And Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you? Come in now. Mr. Smith shouted towards the secretary's office. Then, the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. The cleaning lady, hey, we're having an important conversation here, don't just barge in. Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted. Old lady, who do you think you're talking to? With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public. Upon seeing her face, I couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah!" It was definitely a face I recognized. It's you, the lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time. When I tentatively asked, Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash, cards, and driver's license. You're my savior." To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day. Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, "Indeed, James, I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I appreciate it." It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. "My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother?" As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. "Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company." Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to her son's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behavior and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed to his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful sight of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, "Michael, you are truly despicable. Today, you are being dismissed for disciplinary reasons, but before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being." Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head, weakly looked up and said, "James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done." Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left T-Tech, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the system development department in the next personal change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favor of me returning her wallet with the significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realization of the saying, "Kindness begets kindness." Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time, and we often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, with trustworthy subordinates and favored by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life.